Hi, this is Sarah Braasch. Welcome back to my channel. So, in the wake of the Jussie Smollett and Covington Catholic School kids maelstrom, I want to talk about whether I'm a victim of a hate crime hoax. Yes, I am one of many victims of the Living While Black movement, or as I like to refer to it, the Great Racist Scare of 2018. But was what was done to me an actual hate crime hoax? I am going to say definitively yes, I am a victim of a hate crime hoax. This is made perfectly clear by the letter that my attackers say they wrote in response to the February 24th, 2018 incident. I am convinced that they wrote a letter after the February 24th incident. I'm not convinced that the letter which was later released to the public is the actual text of the letter that was written back in February. But anyway, in this letter, which they released to the public, my attackers accuse me of having perpetrated an act of violence on the evening of February 24th that is comparable to a lynching. It has been in the news as of late that there is an effort to make lynching a federal hate crime. I was not made aware of what it was that I was being accused of having said or done that was racist until sometime in June 2018. Imagine my shock to discover that I had been accused of having perpetrated an act of violence that is comparable to a lynching. Let me just pause for a moment to remind everyone what it is that I actually did on the evening of February 24th, 2018, that is now being construed as an act of violence that is comparable to a lynching. I took reasonable precautions to make sure that I was able to enter my isolated dorm room safely. I asked a man who had seemed to have followed me up to my isolated dorm room to leave, because he did not appear to have authorization to be there. I called the non-emergency helpline of the Yale campus police, and the first thing I said to them was, "I'm not sure if I really need your assistance or no." And they told me that they would send someone by, just in case, just to make sure that everything is okay. That's it. That's what I did on the evening of February 24th, 2018, that is now being construed as an act of violence comparable to a lynching. And I just want to remind everyone that I am the person who was terrorized in my own home on the evening of February 24th, 2018. I was trapped in my dorm room for hours, terrified to leave. I am a severely traumatized, middle-aged woman with mental health disabilities who was simply taking reasonable precautions to ensure that I was able to enter my isolated dorm room safely. My isolated dorm room where I live like a hermit and toil on my dissertation in obscurity. That's where we're at as a society. That's what counts as a lynching on today's college campuses by the far-left ideological fascists and the intersectional feminists. The point being, when my attackers went to Michelle Neeren, the Yale Graduate School Dean of Student Development and Diversity, they wanted her to understand that I had perpetrated a hate crime. And the Yale Dean certainly treated me without any due process whatsoever, as if I were guilty of having perpetrated a hate crime. When my attackers released this text to the public, they wanted the public to understand that I had perpetrated a hate crime, and the public overwhelmingly understood their accusation as such. I was deluged with death threats and threats of violence, including sexual violence, that explicitly stated that I should be murdered, thrown in prison, raped, lose my career, my livelihood, and my reputation because I had perpetrated a hate crime comparable to a lynching. Okay, but maybe my attackers were being sincere. Maybe they really thought that I had perpetrated a hate crime, a racially motivated act of violence comparable to a lynching. That, in and of itself, is an extraordinary indictment of the intersectional feminism and far-left ideological fascism overwhelming today's college campuses. But let's consider that position for a moment. It seems that you can't properly call a hate crime accusation a hoax if the accusers are being sincere, right? You can even consider what occurred on May 8, 2018, when I was illegally recorded in the threshold of my dorm room, a staged trap. It was a staged trap. It was. But you might still think that my attackers were being sincere in the sense that they were trying to trap me in the act of perpetrating a hate crime, a racially motivated act of violence comparable to a lynching. There are several or many problems with this claim. First, the account by my attackers of what occurred on February 24, 2018, in the text that they released to the public, is an incoherent fabrication from beginning to end. Literally nothing that they said happened actually happened. The man who made numerous television appearances says that I invited him into the elevator. This is clearly a lie. They said this because they didn't want to have to say that he followed me up to my isolated dorm room or that he had gained unauthorized access to the 12th floor of the Hall of Graduate Studies, which he did. But then this still makes no sense because what kind of self-respecting hate crime perpetrator invites their victim to accompany them up to their isolated dorm room? And then they say that I called him an intruder. Well, he's not an intruder if I invited him to accompany me, is he? Are they saying that I did this intending all along to call the Yale campus police on him? Their entire scenario literally makes no sense. Second, the Yale housing managers investigated what occurred on February 24th. When I met with the Yale housing managers, they told me that I had done absolutely nothing wrong. They told me that I was the only person involved who had done nothing wrong. They told me that they would deal with all of the other persons involved, including whomever had terrorized me in my dorm room that evening, and they told me that they intended to discipline the resident coordinators for the way that they had handled the situation. I can only assume that my attackers went to the Yale deans to accuse me of having perpetrated an act of violence comparable to a lynching because they were upset with the decision of the Yale housing managers. They didn't accuse me of having perpetrated a hate crime because they believed that I had actually perpetrated a hate crime. I believe that they were, one, trying to get revenge against me for having phoned the Yale campus police, and two, they were trying to deflect blame from themselves for their own wrongdoing. I also believe that jealousy on the part of the woman who made numerous television appearances played no small part in her decision to accuse me of having perpetrated a hate crime. Moreover, consider what occurred on May 8, 2018. I called the non-emergency helpline of the Yale campus police on the morning of May 8th because I encountered someone who made statements to me that made it clear to me that she was very likely one of the persons who had been terrorizing me in my isolated dorm room that evening and for months. What statements did she make? She indicated that she knew that I was the quote-unquote lady who had called the cops on that party, referring to February 24th. My attackers staged a trap for me on May 8th, not to actually catch me perpetrating an actual hate crime, but to get revenge against me for a delusional, jealous, and obsessive personal vendetta. Additionally, consider how the numerous television and media appearances and statements must have been pre-planned. They happened within hours or a mere day or two of the May 8th incident. I started receiving Twitter emails from Sean Kane and other moral outrage warriors of the moral outrage industry within hours of the May 8th incident. I don't think it's hyperbole to construe what my attackers did as a full-blown, immediate, and pre-planned media blitz. I'll bet most hate crime victims wish they could pre-plan for their follow-up media appearances in this way. And this is why I consider myself a victim of a hate crime hoax. I also want to make the point that when the intersectional feminists, including Roxane Gay, continue to cast me as a violent, dangerous, and threatening psychotic and continue to call me a racist because they don't want to admit that they defamed me and participated in the destruction of my life, they are perpetuating this hate crime hoax. I think that other victims of the Living While Black movement may also be victims of actual hate crime hoaxes, but we would have to consider the ad hoc circumstances of the specific frauds. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.